Day of history and hope.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuhu. Welcome to Open Forum from our MTA International Studios at Batur Rahman. Today, we'll be talking about social media. Now, there's a lot to talk about and a lot of different perspectives on social media. For instance, there's a lot of good that can be done to communicate your messages, to have campaigns. It's a way many brands and organizations and individuals communicate to the masses. There's a lot of challenges with social media as well, from social challenges, bullying and other things, as well as there's a privacy debate on social media and what role should social media play in in information gathering and information dissemination. I'd like to share one chart with you around issues kids feel that result from cyberbullying. So there's this whole thing about particularly youth being on social media, and now there are many, many different types of social media, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram to LinkedIn. And there's various uses of those platforms as well, which we'll talk about as well. We have four great guests with us here today, and they have a lot of experience, firsthand experience with social media. In the studio, we have Nuruddin Mahmood Ahmed, who is a practicing litigator in the United States of America. Nuruddin, thank you for being on the show.
Jazakallah, glad to be here.
Next, we have Murabbi Azam Akram Saib, who is a missionary in Seattle, Washington, the United States of America. Murabbi Saib, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Next, we have Sister Ramla, who's done work on various platforms of social media, disseminating messages to individuals in the United States. Sister Ramla, welcome to the show.
Jazakallah for having me.
And we have Salam Bhatti Saib, who is an anti-poverty attorney in Virginia in the United States of America. Salam Saib, welcome to the show.
Jazakallah, pleasure to be here.
Great. So, Mahmood Saib, break this down for us. There's a lot of good with social media. I mean, a lot of us get this natural endorphin high from having one of our posts or tweets going viral. I can communicate with lots of people. I can get firsthand information, unfiltered information from people. There's clearly a lot of good, and seems like there's some challenges with it as well. But frame it for us. Tell us how I should be thinking about social media for myself, for my kids, and for my community.
Yeah, I mean, this is a terrific topic, enormous in scope. I would say, if you want to think about it, I think where we are right now, right, I think we're living in the best of times, but also in the worst of times. And that's kind of, I think, how you have to think about social media. It is an enormously powerful tool that has changed our way of being or way of connecting with people in so many different ways. And that has both led to a lot of positives, like you highlighted, but also a lot of negatives. And so I think really, as we think about it from the perspective of, say, the individual who is approaching social media for themselves, for their family, for their friends, for members of their faith group, I think it's really about thinking about defining your relationship to social media in a very active, deliberate, and thoughtful way. Because the challenges with social media are almost like, it's like a current that can kind of take you, in any direction unless you're actually shaping your own relationship to that media because of all the different challenges that it can bring in addition to the benefits that it creates.
That's great. Let's talk about the positive impacts of social media. Salam Saab, we'll start with you. You're an anti-poverty attorney. You personally use social media to disseminate information on something called Snap. I'm sure you'll explain what that means. But how do you use social media for good?
Social media is a tool, and you can use any tool for good or for evil. For example, a hammer. You can use a hammer to build houses for people, or you can use a hammer to, hurt people with. And of course, the better option to do is help people and build homes. So that's how I try to use Twitter. And a lot of people will use Twitter for bashing people's skulls in, which it might give them this weird high or this weird good feeling, but that's not how it should be used. If you really want to use something for good, you use it to help
Tell me how you
people
use it for
learn
good.
more.
Tell me how you use it for good.
So with my audience, I know that they're interested in anti-hunger work, and in Virginia and America, we have a huge problem with hunger, and there are a lot of people interested in learning more about hunger. So I've cultivated an audience that is interested in learning about the things that are happening in this regard. So when I tweet about something, some positive thing happening in the world of anti-hunger work or something bad happening, then I know I can get this message out really quickly to people who are engaged and will do something about it.
That's great. So, Sister Ramla, let's transition a little bit to if you have a positive story in your communication. I know you've worked on a lot of platforms for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA in promoting various messaging, but let's talk about some of the negatives of social media. I will throw up a chart I'd like you to talk to: cyberbullying victimization, a sample set of almost 5,000 individuals. What are these charts telling us, and what is cyberbullying?
So cyberbullying is basically you go online on somebody's profile and you write mean comments, and it basically starts with just mean comments, hurtful words, and we all know that words really do matter at the end of the day. If you're talking about somebody's appearance, somebody's value, somebody's relationship, words affect you, even if you don't try to let them, but they do affect you. And people develop mental and psychological issues because of that. And
What are these words? Now, why would someone write a mean comment? So, the example, if Mahmoud Saab tweets a nice tweet about something, people just do that out of being mean, or are they friends with Mahmoud and teasing him a little bit?
well, it can be both ways, to be honest, but we know that hiding behind a cyber profile, that people also sometimes make fake profiles just to be out there to hurt others' feelings. It's just much easier to write or say meaningful things to others online as compared to if you're face to face with that person. It just makes it much more easier to type those words and not
I see.
have a
I see.
feeling.
In anonymity. Now, this chart, what is this chart telling us? Seems like, over 35% of these individuals have been, middle and high school students have been cyberbullied. It seems like mean or hurtful communication or spreading even rumors about someone online happens as well.
Yeah, these things happen from day to day basis, and it's not just only contained to children, it also happens in adults as well. If you don't like somebody, it's very easy to just go online and make a rumor and make it go viral, or post some video of somebody. And these things affect humans individually and in short term and long term, and it can cause effects in mental health, psychological health. As you can see on the chart, people have um, hurt themselves physically. People have taken actions just because they're so young, their minds are so fresh that they think that their lives are going to end just because of one mean comment or one rumor.
So it's a very difficult situation, that standpoint. Murabi Azam Akram Saib, now bring some spiritual component to this as well. How do I think about this from a spiritual perspective? What guidance can you give us?
Well, the greatest guidance we have, of course, is the Holy Quran. And so we go there and we see when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has taught us how to live our lives and achieve a noble character. You see, social media, as your previous guests have presented, has many benefits and also can be used as a tool for good, but also evil. So it really depends on the user at the end of the day. So Islam approaches it from that point of view. But what exacerbates the problem, as we all know, is the algorithms built into these products. They exacerbate the biases that you have. And this is what Islam sees as a duplicitous form of communication, which Shaitan employs very effectively.
Help me understand that. So when you say bias, if I'm pro gun control, I will follow people who are pro-gun control, and I won't even listen to the other side of the argument. So I kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, versus having a dichotomy of information I may get from a news story.
Right. And that's the whole point, because Islam says knowledge is power. And if you have the absolute full spectrum of knowledge, only then can you come to a conclusive decision on the matter. But the fact of the matter is that we all fall into our echo chambers, which the algorithms have built into. We follow people that have certain biases that align with ours, and so on and so forth. For the same news, you have two different perspectives and two different stories. So that's really the crux of the matter. And if a believer and a strong believer is not aware of these facts and cannot control themselves, and this is why Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the Imam of the age, has spoken about this issue and has cited the Holy Quran, chapter 23, Surah Al-Mu'minun, verse 6, in which Allah Ta'ala the Almighty says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ. In speaking to the youth and the Muslim youth in 2017, he cited this verse and told us how important it is that we protect our orifices, meaning how we conduct ourselves, our modalities, the way we interact with others. And this also includes social media. If I may, Hazur says that to safeguard and to protect one's chastity and modesty is certainly not just a task of just one individual alone, but is incumbent upon all of us.
That's fascinating. So you're connecting when I think about chastity and modesty, I'm thinking about how I dress, how I act in public. It goes how I act online as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are the guidances that have been given around different platforms? LinkedIn is more of a business platform. Twitter is more news. There's Facebook. There's Instagram. Now there's new platforms that are coming out as well every day. As a parent, what are the guidelines that have been given for youth to be on these platforms?
Well, first of all, if it can be, just avoid it altogether and just stay safe, number one. But if need be, for professional use, and if your career or your institution or something or your vocation requires you to have certain access, and some people use the term networking and so on and so forth, keep it strictly professional. And so don't post personal pictures. You don't need to post your personal family group photos or whatnot. Hazur also talked about this. A lot of people, under the guise of, we're working together or we're professionals, start up chatting and intermingling with the opposite gender. And that can sometimes lead to really sticky situations. So best to just, believe in yourself, strengthen your resolve, know who you really are. It really depends on having a strong believer and walking into this arena of social media. You really have to be very strong within.
And then understand, and because distraction, there's millions of distraction out there. Mahmood Saab, now, Murabi Saab has explained this really well. I mean, quoting directly Hazur's guidance on this. You're a parent of a now 8-year-old. And someone younger as well. As a parent, how do you manage this? I mean, kids, these iPads. The challenge with these technology is that kids they're not watching one TV where you can see this. They're on various devices now. Due to the pandemic, a lot of these kids were going to school on these devices, whether it's a laptop, an iPad, or other devices at home. The monitoring is very difficult. How do parents deal with this?
Yeah, it's a really challenging issue, particularly as you noted during the pandemic, because the screens and the devices have gone from being an object of leisure to now actually being an object that's necessary for the children's schooling, which means that it's ever harder to then differentiate between when they're being used for an educational purpose or for something that is diverting and perhaps negative, which is definitely the case. And I think there's abundant research that supports the spiritual guidance that Imam Saab referenced in terms of the negative impact of excessive screen time on children's behavior, on their mental acuity, on their overall mental health. And so I think for me, to broaden it out a little bit, I mean, I would say almost every person and every family needs like a deliberate social media strategy.
Interesting.
Where you really want to mindfully think about, okay, how are we interacting with social media? Am I going on social media? Am I following Jama'at accounts that allow me to, for example, amplify the message of the promised Messiah? We're speaking on a day when there is an advertisement appearing in the New York Times carrying the message of the promised Messiah. How can we amplify that? That would be a positive way of doing it. As a community, we are out there speaking to people in our communities across every city that we're in, but also across the country. And we're using social media because that's where increasingly eyeballs are. And again, I think we're being part of a movement to use social media positively. We're reinforcing, for example, the community service that we do, but we're also reinforcing the message of the promised Messiah because it is so salient in this current time. And so we use videos, we use hashtags and other tools that are available on social media to carry that message. And again, I think it's about proactively thinking through how are we engaging with social media.
That's a real question here, and we're going to move a little faster here. But Rabbi Saab, you're a father as well. What do you think about this family social media strategy, and how would you do this at home? Would you allow your children to be on any type of social media, or would you just cut it all off?
Well, I'm just going to quote what Hazur has stated.
Yeah.
And it's basically at the end of the day, he says, in this era, Allah the Almighty has given us this tool. We as a Jama'at are definitely benefiting from it. But what Hazur is saying is that we got to practice what we preach. He says, if we observe our standards, we got to keep that responsibility upon ourselves. And Hazur's message is that it is also possible that if others hear our message and they are aligned to our message, they will come on this platform. So Hazur's really reminding us that, yes, we have to have this communication at home. We have to communicate with our kids, but we have to approach it very responsibly. Now, there's a great book online that has detailed all these things, and hopefully at the end, maybe we can reference that for the viewers.
Sure, absolutely. And so, Sister Romla, you're also a mother. How do you manage this as a parent on a day-to-day basis?
I think it really starts from yourself. You have to be a good role model in everything. And Hazur and Islam really teaches that if you want to teach your kids something, you have to become that person. So you have to look within yourselves to make those improvements. If you're on your phone all the time, if you're using social media, or if you're on YouTube, then you'll end up giving those things to your children. There's so many tools and apps these days that you can monitor what your kids can go on and what your kids can watch. Utilize them, sit with them, and I would limit the iPad use for sure. If they do want to watch YouTube, put it on TV, but knowing that in this day and age, you cannot force your children to not be active on social media because all of their schoolwork, homeworks, it's all online. We have to be mindful, but we have to lead by example at the end of the day.
Mahmood Saab, let's transition a little bit from the personal to the community aspect of this. There's these, in the U.S. at least, in Congress, former president debated acts on what rights and what responsibilities the social media companies have. How should I be thinking about that? Is this free speech? Is there's Senate hearings around this? I mean, this is beyond just a colloquial conversation. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih was 10 years ahead of this in sharing the messaging, as Murabbi Saab has shared so well. Where's the debate catching up in the political world now?
Absolutely. I think what you said there is critical, is that with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that is something that, His Holiness Mr. has been saying for some time in various contexts. And now we're seeing it play out in the halls of power, where social media companies a few years ago, I attended a conference at the White House on behalf of the Jama'at talking about extremism online. And at the time, this was about 5 years ago, social media companies were taking the position, we are simply a channel or a vehicle. It's not up to us to moderate this content or to otherwise police it. And over the years, we have seen now the detrimental effect that disinformation online can have. Frankly, it played an active role in events such as the attempt to incite an insurrection upon the United States Capitol in the wake of the 2020 election. And I think the social media companies have now realized that they are going to be held accountable for this kind of activity.
Social media companies have taken personal action, not legal action, on this as well. Salam Saab, now you're a practicing attorney as well. How do you think about this whole idea of turning off someone's platform? Now, putting the rules of that aside, is that fair? I mean, former President Trump's account was turned off, and that was his bullhorn to the world.
When things like this happen, a lot of people like to, try to hide behind the First Amendment. But the First Amendment doesn't
What is the
apply
First
to these
Amendment?
private companies. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution says you have the right to freedom of speech and some other rights too, but talking about freedom of speech here. So the government cannot inhibit your right to a freedom of speech. So you should be able to protest out there. You should be able to march on the streets. That is your right, and the government cannot stop you from doing that in a free space. But when you have tools like Twitter and Facebook, that's not governmental property. You don't have the government enshrined in that. It's a whole private affair, and they have their own policies, they have their own rules. So when you violate those rules, then you are at the mercy of those rules and that corporation. So, for example, with former President Trump having violated the rules of Twitter more than others would, then he was banned as a result. And for common people like you and me, if we even slighted once or twice, we would be blocked and banned a lot quicker.
Rabi Saab, Azam Akram Saab, tell us a little bit about, Salam Saab talked about freedom of speech. Hazur has talked about freedom of speech directly, not in the name of freedom of speech to harm people, paraphrasing here. But what is the guidance from Hazur on freedom of speech, and what are the boundaries of freedom of speech? Because as we can tell, the world is at least 10 years behind when Hazur speaks on these topics, and we see the downside as well. Looking forward, what is Hazur's guidance so we can kind of talk about what these companies should be doing?
I would answer this question in two parts. First of all, Hazur is reminding us that, despite the fact that these new innovations and whatnot may have challenges, it's up to us to make sure that we know how to use them, number one. But number two, more importantly, he's actually advised the community to go into this field and to gain expertise into how the functioning and the inner workings of the social media are taking place and gain a proficiency there. The second thing that he has cited is that the fact that you can say and you have the right to say anything you want doesn't necessarily mean you have to absolutely say it. You have to look at what you're saying and what the intent behind it is. Citing the 23rd chapter of the Holy Quran, where it says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ يَحْفِظُونَ. Prior to that, the attribute of a true believer is that they do not involve themselves in any vain or idle either talk or activity. And so under that guise of not involving yourself or your time and resources in vain pursuits, that really is the litmus test of how to go about changing and also guiding these companies on the products that they design.
Now we're going to do our lightning round, where I'll ask you guys to kind of do a unique spin on this. We'll start with Salam Bhatti Saib.
Just boiling it down to the simple thing, think before you tweet. Just as you will think before you speak, think before you tweet. You might want to type it out, leave it as a draft, come back to it later, and then press send if you think it's really worthy of sending.
Great, Jazakallah. Sister Ramla?
I would say the exact same thing. Make sure that you double think of whatever you're posting, and make sure that you know who the followers are. And even if you want to be on such platforms, limit your followers, because they can repost your material. So be mindful of what you put out there and don't try to copy others.
Interesting. Limit your followers. I thought the amount of followers you had was your self-worth in some way. So that's a great advice. Azam Akram Saab?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the following panelists that came before me. On a practical level, what I do see sometimes is challenges with people who have issues with stuff that they've posted 10, 15 years ago, whether it's in their relationships that have popped up, whether it's application to college or schools, whether it's future employment, stuff that you post online, never, even if it's for a second, it's been captured. You have to be really cognizant, be responsible before signing your life and everything you have away.
Through social media. Thank you. Mahmood Saab, sum this up for us.
Sure. I would say maybe think about 3 rules. So I would say number 1, you want to have a strong moral and spiritual foundation before you engage on social media, so that you are able to withstand the challenges that are out there. So you are on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, on the right path, and don't get diverted. I would say second, you want to use social media in a conscious, responsible way, so that you are defining your relationship to social media and not the other way around. And then finally, I would say lead, don't follow. You want to set a positive example. You want to amplify the positive message that we embody as Ahmadiyya Muslims. You want to create positive messaging, counter the bullying. And so I would say, do all those things. Lead people in a positive direction on social media, because that is the way you can amplify that impact.
Great, thank you. Thank you to all our guests for being on today. I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot, whether it's from the positive impacts of social media that we've seen, the positive impact of maybe ending world hunger, amongst other things, or sharing the message of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, to the challenges of social media and cyberbullying and how to prevent those, and most importantly, following the guidance of Hazur. Hazur has been very clear on this. He has shared guidance on this, on how we should be using these platforms responsibly, and how we kind of go forward in leading the world, not following the world, in our public presence, whether it's on social media or elsewhere. This has been Open Forum from the MTA International Studios at Batur Rahman.